Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we take a stack of sources, articles, research, and notes and really try to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge or insight, all custom tailored for you, our curious listener.
That's right.
Today, we're asking something quite intriguing. What if a major political figure, someone who has, truly navigated everything from a global pandemic to a major European war, offered a really candid, no-holds-barred look back at their time and power? What kind of fascinating and maybe even shocking revelations would come out of an account like that?
It's a rare perspective, isn't it? And incredibly valuable, going beyond just the daily headlines.
Exactly.
A memoir like this gives us a chance to understand the immense pressures, the real-time decisions, and while the underlying philosophies that shape some of the most turbulent years in recent history.
Right.
It's a unique opportunity to sort of step into their shoes, even just for a moment, and grasp the monumental stakes involved.
Absolutely. And that's precisely what we're embarking on today. We're diving deep into extensive excerpts from a very recent and revealing political memoir.
Okay.
This isn't just a chronological list of events. It's really a first-person narrative that seeks to explain the why behind the what during an extraordinary and often pretty chaotic period.
Yeah, the context is everything.
So our mission in this deep dive is really to unpack the critical moments, those ambitious visions, and also the surprising personal insights shared within these pages.
Right. We'll explore that intricate dance between domestic policy and international relations, the constant battles fought on, well, multiple fronts.
And what it all means for you, the citizen, as you try to make sense of these profoundly complex times. Okay, let's dig in.
Let's do it.
So to begin, let's set the stage. We're looking at the political landscape that really dominated the early parts of this memoir, specifically the seismic event that was Brexit.
Ah, yes, Brexit.
The author paints this picture of a nation deeply, almost irrevocably divided, yet one that, in his view, had delivered a clear, albeit narrow, mandate for leaving the European Union.
Yeah, despite what he describes as overwhelming establishment opposition, that's a core theme right from the start.
It really is.
This memoir gives a really clear articulation of this deep chasm between public sentiment and establishment views on Brexit. He reflects on the Supreme Court's actions back in 2019.
Right, the prorogation case.
Exactly. He describes their ruling against his government's prorogation of Parliament as legal adventurism.
Strong words.
Very. He saw it as a judiciary potentially overstepping its constitutional role, maybe being swayed by the ongoing psychological and political pressures from Brexit's divisions, almost trying to impose a political solution where, the judiciary should stay neutral.
And he backs this feeling up with some pretty striking details, doesn't he?
He does. He underscores the astonishing reality of that 52-48% vote margin, especially when you consider what he calls the balance of forces in the debate.
Meaning the weight of opinion against leaving.
Precisely. He emphasizes the powerful, almost monolithic opposition to Brexit, stating it came from the entire engine of government propaganda, all the main political parties, and an overwhelming majority of the British establishment.
And he really drills down on that point, giving specific examples, just so you can grasp the scale of this divide he's talking about.
Yeah, he claims that most readers of the Times, a traditionally centrist or center-right paper, were over 70% hostile to leaving the EU.
Wow, over 70%.
Yeah. And similarly, he points to most BBC journalists, most university lecturers, most members of the Confederation of British Industry, CBI, most MPs by quite a long way, and most members of the great British legal profession, all overwhelmingly against Brexit, in his telling.
That paints a vivid picture. A political class and intellectual elite seemingly fundamentally at odds with a significant chunk of the popular vote.
It's a very clear demarcation he draws. And he points to the failure of that frond movement called Change UK.
Ah, yes, the breakaway group included his sister, didn't it?
It did, Rachel Johnson. Their poor showing in the 2019 European elections, he argues, was clear evidence that voters were absolutely not signaling a lust to rejoin the EU.
So for him, that reinforced the original referendum result.
Unequivocally. He felt it showed the public wanted to stick with leaving, and this context, as he explains it, heavily framed the frame of mind of Tory MPs in the summer of 2019.
How so?
Well, faced with those Euro election results and Theresa May's resignation, The maths of potential general election outcomes, he says, indicated complete annihilation for the Conservatives if they failed to deliver on Brexit.
A real pressure cooker situation then.
Absolutely. And it reveals the central tension in modern democracies, doesn't it? When a narrow popular vote confronts widespread institutional opposition, it can really destabilize political norms and relationships.
Which the memoir shows through those judicial and parliamentary clashes he describes.
Exactly.
That's a profound point. Okay, so moving from that broader political landscape, the memoir then really digs into the fierce internal political struggles needed to actually deliver Brexit.
Yeah, facing opposition not just from outside, but significantly and often brutally from within his own party.
That sounds like an incredibly challenging, maybe personally draining period.
It was, by his account, truly brutal. He talks about the joint report of December 2017, negotiated by the previous government.
Theresa May's deal, essentially.
Right. He calls it Brexit in name only, or Brino. From his perspective, it was a moral and political disaster.
Why so disastrous in his view?
Well, he saw it primarily designed to mollify the anxieties of the CBI and the Treasury, but more critically, he viewed it as a deliberate way to stop divergence from EU rules and effectively end the prospect of independent free trade deals.
So preventing a real break.
That's how he saw it. Even implicitly allowing for a future reversal of Brexit under a different prime minister. It shows his deep distrust of the previous government's commitment to a truly independent path.
And he doesn't pull punches on the legal system either, does he?
No. He states the Supreme Court was interfering with the prerogative power of the executive to negotiate with other countries, basically stepping on the government's traditional right to conduct foreign affairs. But then we had this particularly striking moment. He recounts Parliament's most ingenious plan, which he attributes to the active connivance of Speaker Bercow,
whose car, he makes a point of noting,
famously had that bollocks to Brexit sticker, yes. He describes MPs taking control of the House of Commons order paper, a really rare procedural move.
Like what?
Like cruise ship passengers suddenly storming the bridge. That's his phrase.
That's a wonderfully vivid image, almost theatrical.
It is, isn't it? And this parliamentary maneuver, as he tells it, led to the dramatic de-whipping of 21 Tory MPs.
De-whipping meaning?
Effectively suspending them from the Conservative Parliamentary Party. A drastic measure rarely seen, casting them out.
Wow.
He describes looking at the list with stone-cold disbelief, being forced to expel people he considered political heroes like Ken Clarke, the father of the House.
Who he'd even voted for as leader himself.
Exactly. And others like Philip Hammond, who joined the party 45 years earlier, and Nick Soames, Winston Churchill's grandson, who'd only voted against the party twice in 37 years.
Incredible names.
It is. And he describes feeling like Octavian ordering the prescription of names. That's a visceral comparison to the ancient Roman tyrant ordering executions or exile. It really conveys the profound sense of personal and political betrayal he felt.
He paints this picture of intense, almost suffocating political pressure, constantly feeling like he was negotiating with one hand tied behind my back.
Yeah, because his political position was crumbling, not just from external forces, but from that internal dissent.
Right.
Even Michael Gove, a cabinet colleague, he recalls, expressed ambiguous sentiment at one point, leading the author to tell someone to watch Gove in the wing mirror for any signs of disloyalty.
Intense paranoia, almost.
It sounds like it. He recounts a desperate attempt to trigger a general election by daring Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, to support it. Corbyn, he says, refused, and I have to say that he looked pretty damn ridiculous.
So this section really illustrates the brutal nature of high-stakes politics.
Absolutely. Where even close colleagues and long-standing party members can become adversaries in what feels like an existential battle.
And the impact was immediate.
Tangible and swift. Like Amber Rudd's resignation as Work and Pensions Secretary, explicitly citing her lack of enthusiasm for Brexit, though he says he felt he could plausibly recover from that. The memoir really reveals how deeply entrenched ideological divides, even with a narrow popular mandate, can fundamentally destabilize established political norms and institutional relationships. It highlights that profound tension for party loyalty and executive power in a parliamentary democracy.
The personal cost and internal fracturing you details are truly striking. Okay, let's shift gears now and look at his time as mayor of London.
Right, which he frames as a crucial blueprint for his later national agenda.
He inherited a city, he says, in flux, facing decline, and he saw it as his fundamental challenge to revitalize it.
Yeah, this detailed historical backdrop gives crucial context for understanding his leadership philosophy. He actually portrays Ken Livingstone, his predecessor, as the 500-pound gorilla of London politics.
High praise, in a way.
It is. Acknowledging Livingstone's significant political footprint and how many of his once so-called loony left causes like gay rights, feminism, anti-racism, even the Good Friday Agreement, had remarkably moved into the political mainstream.
He gives credit where it's due them.
Seems so. He also acknowledges Livingstone's audacious and highly popular congestion charge, shows a willingness to credit his opponent, even while setting himself apart.
But he also paints a pretty grim, quite evocative picture of London's state, especially recalling his childhood there.
He does. He talks about London having lost almost a quarter of the population by 1964, a decline that continued into the 1970s.
And his personal memories.
Almost visceral. The smell of the beer-splashed pavements, parks full of dog shit and Spangles wrappers, and the vilicarious teeth of the children. That imagery really brings to life the sense of urban decay and neglect he witnessed.
Those stark personal memories ground his narrative, don't they? Giving a clear sense of the city he felt he had to save.
Definitely. He notes the city's slow recovery in the 80s and 90s, attributing it to the return of good jobs and good transport. A period, he says, fostered an undying devotion to Maggie, Margaret Thatcher, of course.
But then the 2008 crash hit.
Right. The global credit crunch walloped the property market in London, he says, leading to cranes stopping moving and widespread fears of London's sinking.
That was even a Time magazine cover, wasn't it?
It was a dramatic phrase. There was serious talk of an exodus of talent and investment from the capital.
So despite these seemingly huge odds, he decided to run against Livingston for a third term.
Yeah, he describes it as a choice to do something exciting, seeing a narrow way of beating him from the polls.
So not just ambition, but tackling a massive challenge for the city he felt connected to.
That's the impression. This experience, facing down perceived decline and then spearheading a recovery, provided that crucial template for his later national leveling up agenda. It establishes a direct line from his London mayoralty to his time as PM.
Interesting connection.
Indeed. And his London mayoralty was largely characterized by this strong focus on practical governance, specifically crime reduction and ambitious infrastructure projects.
Things people could see and feel.
Exactly. Tangible successes he could point to. Upon winning, he vividly describes feeling the instant mantle of office, suddenly responsible for every bus, every tube train, every tram, every fire engine, and every one of the 52,000 men and women of the Metropolitan Police.
Wow, that's a huge remit.
It is. Plus, environment, skills, housing, it highlights the sheer breadth of the mayoral role.
And he immediately found those taxpayer-funded bottles of Chateauneuf toupee in Ken Livingstone's cabinet.
He did, yes, which he gleefully used to make the point about perceived fiscal fripperies, maybe a disconnect from ordinary taxpayers.
Made some political capital out of it.
No doubt. He also took every chance to criticize Ken for his bizarre friendship with the Venezuelan Marxist dictator Hugo Chavez, and critically his failure to stop kids bleeding to death in fights between gangs. A clear vow to tackle knife crime head-on.
His stance on knife crime is particularly notable, isn't it? Reveals something about his core beliefs on law and order.
It really does. He firmly believed it was not a public health problem or a mere epiphenomenon of social and economic disadvantage, dismissing that idea as largely baloney.
So what was it, in his view?
A criminal problem caused by criminals and criminal gangs, requiring a criminal justice solution and simply enforcing the law. He was heavily influenced by that broken windows theory.
Right, the idea that tackling minor disorder prevents more serious crime.
Precisely, creating a safer environment overall.
And he points to results with pride.
Considerable pride. Overall neighborhood crime, he claims, down 20%. Bus crime down an impressive 40%. He states London gained a deserved reputation as one of the safest big cities in the world during his tenure.
But he expresses frustration about stop and search.
He does. That Theresa May, as Home Secretary, changed the law in 2014 to make stop and search more difficult suggests a philosophical difference there, a perceived weakening of police powers he disagreed with.
Okay. What about transport?
Well, he initiated that bike hire scheme, the Boris bikes, as they became known.
Right.
He describes it as a bigger and better version of Paris's Velib, noting Livingstone had promised something similar, but done nothing.
And the impact.
By his second term, cycling was up 50%, with fewer than 10 cycling deaths per year, the lowest in over a decade. Shows a commitment to active travel and safety.
And the Route Master bus, that was a big one.
A defining project, reviving the iconic bus, which was, in his words, vanishing, and knackered.
The new bus for London, designed by Thomas Heatherwick, became an icon, didn't it? Even in a Bond film.
That's right, Skyfall. But crucially, it wasn't just iconic. It was a hybrid with 40% lower emissions and, in its telling, truly embodied leveling up.
Also, leveling up in London.
By sourcing parts from all across the UK. Think about it. Huddersfield for seat coverings, Darlington for the engine, Middleton for destination blinds, Telford for seats, Hoddesdon for wheelchair ramps, Liskeard for flooring.
So a local project having national economic benefits, supporting manufacturing jobs countrywide.
Exactly. A tangible example of that concept in action. He also highlights other big projects like Crossrail being on the way, that massive east-west rail line, and a new cable car across the Thames.
Demonstrating a proactive, can-do attitude.
That's the image, an attitude that became a hallmark of his post-Olympics approach and, later, his national agenda. This whole section details a very practical, results-oriented approach to governance.
Tackling tangible problems.
Yeah. Crime, improving daily life through infrastructure. It does raise an interesting question for you, the listener. How much are these policy successes down to a strong, central, executive-led approach versus maybe broader societal factors or things already set in motion?
Something to think about. Okay, building on that can-do attitude and leveraging London's global status, the memoir covers how he managed to get economic growth and demonstrate national capability.
Right, overcoming initial skepticism and challenges, particularly around the 2012 Olympics.
He recounts those infamous comments by Mitt Romney, didn't he?
He did. The disconcerting and discouraging remarks from the then U.S. presidential candidate about London's Olympic preparations just days before the Games.
Set up a narrative of needing to prove the critics wrong.
Absolutely. A need to demonstrate London's, and by extension Britain's, capability on the world stage.
And then just before the Games, that massive security issue with G4S.
Yeah, a huge cock-up, as he calls it. G4S lost track of 14,000 employees, threatening the security.
How did he frame that?
Interestingly, he attributes London's underlying economic resilience to the sheer number of young people who, as he puts it, had vamoose to pursue other and perhaps more lucrative job opportunities like short-order chefs in Acapulco or bodyguards to Russian oligarchs.
That's quite a spin. Reframing a failure is a sign of dynamism.
It is an interesting take. He admits the initial days of the Olympics felt disastrous. No gold medals for Team GB early on, and that mad promise he'd made to win enough gold bullion to bail out Greece, weighing heavily on him.
High stakes and early anxiety then.
Definitely. He describes hearing the Chariots of Fire theme over and over for other nations, but never God Save the Queen. He also details meeting with HRH, then Prince Charles, at Buckingham Palace to discuss attracting investment, particularly for redeveloping Battersea Power Station. That vast brick cathedral shows an effort to get high-level support.
And post-Olympics, he led a global investment drive.
Personally led it, visiting key cities, Hong Kong, Australia, India, the Gulf, America, Malaysia. He describes attracting a great unstoppable Nazare-like wave of dosh.
Nazare, like the giant waves in Portugal. Great metaphor for a flood of cash.
Perfect, isn't it? Totaling $4 billion of commitments within just a year, he claims. And he explicitly states, it was in this fulfilling and fertile period that I refined my thoughts about leveling up.
So directly linking London's success to his developing national vision.
Clearly, this section really showcases the power of a successful global event to change perception and boost confidence, connecting local achievements directly to that broader national vision.
It's fascinating how those challenges, like G4S, were reframed.
As indicators of London's underlying strength, yeah. He also contrasts the handling of the 2011 London riots, where he felt police showed too much restraint, letting the virus of disorder spread.
With Theresa May later blocking his request for water cannon.
Right. Shows a consistent belief in a firm approach to law and order, suggesting it was key to his governance philosophy, both locally and nationally.
A powerful linkage from London's renewal to the national agenda. Okay, let's widen our lens now to global Britain.
Right. Focusing on how the memoir discusses what he saw as a necessary shift in UK foreign policy post-Brexit.
Emphasizing independent global influence and proactive responses to international crises.
He states his role as Foreign Secretary from 2016 meant having to remake British foreign policy from top to bottom, pivoting away from just positioning within the EU to positioning globally.
And he highlights specific achievements.
What he considers distinguished achievements, yes, For instance, he claims biffing Assad so hard on the nose that he never again used chemical weapons after the 2018 Salisbury poisonings.
The Novichok attack in the UK.
Correct. He also notes successfully persuading allies towards a much tougher line on Russia, resulting in that unprecedented expulsion of 153 Russian diplomats from 29 countries.
And he was especially proud of launching that global campaign for girls' education.
12 years of quality education for every girl globally, yeah. A cause he connects to figures like Emma Watson and the impact of authors like J.K. Rowling on reading.
He then takes us back in time, doesn't he, to Kosovo in '98.
He does, describing it as a novel project of humanitarian intervention against Milosevic. He vividly recounts driving into Kosovo with a wacky races convoy of journalists.
Wacky races.
His phrase. Encountering drunk, cheering, elated Yugoslav army soldiers and Arkan's Tigers, that notorious Serbian paramilitary unit with black APC's skull and crossbones painted on them.
Chilling detail.
And he was personally present at Pristina Airport when, as he puts it, everyone claimed afterwards we almost had World War III.
When the Russian APCs unexpectedly occupied the airport.
Exactly. Trying to hold the runway, provide sanctuary for Serbs, an incredibly tense standoff.
He then pivots to Iraq in 2003.
Right. Recalling his own loudly airing my doubts as an MP, even though his party leader, Ian Duncan Smith, supported the war. He notes George Osborne, however, was all for it. Shows a personal history of questioning these major interventions.
And he reflects critically on the aftermath.
Very critically, on what he calls mayhem in Mesopotamia after Iraq 2003, and the subsequent right turn in Libya in 2011, where NATO blitzed Gaddafi and later apologized to figures like Belhaj for his torture.
Stressing the need for a plan for what comes next.
Crucially, the often overlooked need for a coherent plan for what would come next after removing dictators, implying past failures led to chaos.
He then points to Syria in 2013 as a turning point.
A critical one in his view. The West having blinked after Assad used chemical weapons against his own people.
And the consequence of that blinking.
He believes this inaction directly led Putin to draw conclusions and launch his 2014 invasion of Ukraine, seizing Crimea and parts of Donbass.
Wow.
He describes watching the dismemberment of a sovereign and independent European nation while, he admits, we channeled the spirit of Neville Chamberlain.
A stark self-assessment acknowledging appeasement.
He highlights the rise of autocracies then.
Yeah, Iran, China, and Russia, wherever they can make mischief, often with their Wagner Group janissaries, referring to the Russian private military company. He also touches on Pakistan.
It acknowledges it as the world's biggest breeding grounds for terror and home of Osama bin Laden, questioning if UK efforts on girls' education were really enough to counter such deep issues.
And Israel-Palestine.
Refers to the Balfour Declaration, the British pledge for a Jewish homeland, as a diplomatic fudge and a complex legacy of the British Empire.
And the Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe case.
Describes her plight, seeing it as part of Iran's broader pattern of taking dual nationals hostage for leverage.
He even expresses a long-standing Russophilia, love for Russian culture.
Stemming from childhood reading of Dostoevsky and a school trip to Moscow in the 80s, yes. A personal background that stands in sharp contrast to his later tough stance on Putin's actions.
This whole section offers a sweeping, often stark view of global affairs.
It does. And what's insightful is his candid assessment of past Western failures, particularly Iraq and Syria, and how he views these as having emboldened authoritarian regimes.
Which leads us to consider how much a single nation, even an influential one, can truly shape world events without clear international consensus and solid long-term planning.
It's a crucial question about the limits of national power in a complex world.
Definitely. Following that, the memoir outlines the post-Brexit strategy for a more outward-looking, globally connected UK.
Through enhanced trade and strategic alliances, what he enthusiastically terms the promise of global Britain.
He felt he was pushing in an open door as Foreign Secretary.
Yeah, noting the UK invests far more overseas than any other European country, suggesting a natural global inclination already existed.
And he initiated that Indo-Pacific tilt.
A strategic foreign policy shift, yes. Aiming to reinforce historic friendships and alliances in that region. Deepening his friendship with India's Modi, launching talks on UK-India military collaboration.
He also emphasizes ties with Egypt.
Highlights the historic relationship with the UK as its biggest international investor, even helping build the Cairo monorail with trains made in Derby.
And he argues strongly against comparing the EU to the USA.
Based on his own book on the Dream of Rome, yeah, concluding that Allo only worked with an all-powerful central authority relying on military violence, common taxation, and the cult of emperor worship.
seeing the EU's path as creating undemocratic influence.
That's his view. And he celebrates Britain avoiding the euro and the social chapter of workers' rights, seeing these as beneficial independent decisions that preserved UK's sovereignty and flexibility.
What about China? The tone shifted there, didn't it?
Significantly. He notes the UK's attitude had hardened by 2016, signaling the end of the golden era associated with the previous Chancellor George Osborne.
And this shift led to
Winkling the Chinese out of major involvement in the Hinkley nuclear plant and the entire civil nuclear program. A diplomatically painful and economically expensive decision, he acknowledges.
But he says he doesn't sound xenophobic.
While stating, "I don't sound xenophobic," he identifies clear concerns. Dependence on China for critical national infrastructure, academic influence, systematic industrial espionage and theft, and the oppression of Uyghur Muslims, Tibet, and Hong Kong.
Asserting the UK must speak out.
Must feel free to point all this out, China, yes. But he cautions against a new Cold War, urging continued engagement to understand a fifth of humanity, a nuanced approach to a complex power.
And he really champions the UK's post-Brexit trade position.
Big time, emphasizing complete control of our fisheries and coastal waters, the ability to promote agricultural policies that suit British farmers, and launching 7 low-tax-free ports for regional growth and leveling up.
Claiming the UK became the #1 global champion of free trade.
He does, with more free trade agreements than any other independent country, enabling new markets for UK goods, citing examples like pork to Mexico and beauty products to China, which he claims were impossible under Brussels' rule.
And this is where he makes that particularly strong claim about AUKUS.
Yeah, the security pact with Australia and the US. He describes it as a brilliant and ambitious geostrategic proposal whose only downside was that it was going to put French noses badly out of joint, a wry nod to the diplomatic fallout.
And crucially, he links AUKUS and the vaccine rollout directly to Brexit.
Explicitly, stating they couldn't have happened, certainly not in that way, without Brexit. A very direct causal link in his mind.
He also reflects on his relationship with President Biden.
Yeah, whom the media assumed would be more aloof, more skeptical about Brexit as an Irish American. He highlights the need to make common cause, despite perceived differences, even exchanging gifts like custom bikes.
So this section outlines a bold, reimagined role for the UK, distinct from its EU past.
Definitely. Positing Brexit not as a retreat, but as an enabler for new strategic and economic opportunities.
That direct link drawn between Brexit, alliances, and trade deals is striking. Invites you to consider the tangible benefits and maybe the costs of this new global positioning.
It's a significant claim, and it leads us right into his account of navigating those unprecedented crises, starting with the immense challenges of leading during a global pandemic.
Right. The memoir covers everything from those initial uncertainties in his own personal bout with COVID-19 to the massive vaccination effort.
He sets the scene by reviewing past health scares that shaped public and political responses. Edwina Currie's salmonella warning in the 80s.
Which he says bankrupted poultry farmers.
Yeah. Then mad cow disease in 96, SARS in 2002-03, which led to masks in Asia but no UK deaths, and the bird flu scare in 2008, where London's Tamiflu stocks had, rather embarrassingly, gone off.
So this history framed his approach to COVID-19, an unknown threat.
Clearly, he describes the profound initial uncertainties. Or was it a Moloch that was going to kill 500,000? Using that ancient god of sacrifice as a metaphor for the virus's potential.
And Public Health England initially downplayed the risk.
Stated the risk was low, just days before things escalated dramatically, he notes. Then on March 12th, he had to level with people, deliver the grim news that many were going to die.
Even though Sage advised holding back on restrictions initially.
Yeah, advised to hold our fire on restrictions at that specific moment, according to the memoir.
He recounts his own personal battle with COVID, too.
Deeply personal. Feeling grim, his face, the color of mayonnaise, intense chest tightness. And the shock of Derek Draper's severe illness husband of a well-known TV presenter really struck him.
Disproving that early notion it was just a disease of the elderly.
Exactly, highlighting its indiscriminate nature. Post-first lockdown, he details the fierce efforts to get kids back in school with Gavin Williamson, the education secretary.
Despite objections.
Vehement objections from the left of the teaching unions, and labor leader Keir Starmer, whom he says he hammered him in the Commons for what he saw as obstruction.
And he championed mass testing.
Vigorously, as a crucial alternative to prolonged lockdowns, an initiative led by Dido Harding. By October 2020, they were hitting 300,000 tests a day.
which he claims was more than any other European country.
He does, demonstrating that drive for rapid, large-scale intervention. He describes the difficult decision to go back into lockdown on November 5th.
Guided by that principle, salus populi suprema lex.
The welfare of the people is the supreme law, yes. Though schools and universities crucially remained open, reflecting that desire to balance public health and education.
Then Omicron hit late 2021. A sickening sense of déjà vu.
A disheartening repeat of earlier dilemmas, yeah. With even Munira Mirza, whom he considered a staunch libertarian, surprisingly leading a pro-lockdown delegation within government.
He grappled intensely with the rising infections.
And the grim fact that British mortality has never risen so fast at any time since the Second World War, a stark reality check.
He contrasts the anti-lockdown arguments, pressure on NHS, missed appointments.
With his view that an uncontrolled large wave of disease would be even worse, ultimately deciding to rely on the vaccines as the primary way out.
Launching Get Boosted Now, accelerating the booster rollout.
Feeling vastly happier to be vaccinating than locking down, he says, indicating a shift in his strategic preference.
And this is where those geopolitical and logistical challenges really surface.
Absolutely. He notes the UK was the first country globally to approve Pfizer-BioNTech on December 2nd, then Oxford-AstraZeneca swiftly after.
Not about nationalism, he says.
But a hard-nosed, practical concern that other governments, like the U.S. with its Defense Supply Act, would sequester supplies of U.S.-made vaccines for themselves.
He was spooked by the earlier PPE shortages.
So spooked, he even considered an aquatic raid on a warehouse in Leiden in the Netherlands to seize what he believed was legally ours. Shows the desperate measures contemplated. Lord Dayton was brought in specifically to lead procurement.
And he recounts the EU invoking Article 16 of the Northern Ireland Protocol.
That very public moment, January 30th, 2021, a contentious move to stop AstraZeneca using the Northern Irish loophole to send vaccines to the UK, illustrates those immediate post-Brexit tensions.
How did he describe the EU Commission President's reaction?
Ursula von der Leyen as deeply embarrassed and acting under orders from other member states. While he was told, "You must not say that this is because of Brexit," he notes he knew, everyone can see that Brexit has at least been helpful in securing independent vaccine supplies.
Believing the public credited the government's vaccination handling.
Ultimately, yes, noting vaccination was something that could only be really driven and delivered by government.
This whole account highlights agonizing choices, doesn't it? Balancing public health, economy, liberties.
Definitely. And the vaccine supply struggle, the Article 16 move, they reveal how geopolitics and past decisions like Brexit kept shaping responses. It shows that during a pandemic, public health outcomes can indeed be profoundly linked to a nation's geopolitical independence and agility in a global supply chain.
A profound observation on the interconnectedness of it all. Beyond the pandemic, the memoir recounts another major geopolitical earthquake, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
And the immediate, resolute UK response, including personal risks taken by the author.
He vividly recalls that morning, February 24th, 2022.
Waking to harrowing news of gunfire and bombing in cities across Ukraine, realizing all hell was being let loose. Within 20 minutes, he was on the phone with President Zelensky.
Who described
An all-out invasion from north, from the east, from the south, shooting already in Kyiv, Russian Spetsnaz agents, elite special forces actively trying to find Zelensky and kill him.
chilling. He offered Zelensky exile in London.
He did. An option Zelensky politely but firmly declined, stating he had no intention of leaving the Ukrainian capital.
He describes Ukraine as giant enigma.
A child at the center of some ghastly custody dispute, yeah. Notes its immense size, second biggest in Europe, population 45 million, rich resources. Highlights its ability to produce free and original spirits.
From Eurovision winners, too.
To a president who famously pretended to play the piano with his genitals, emphasizing Ukraine's vibrant, unconventional spirit.
He recounts the Munich Security Conference just before the invasion.
February 2022. Where the Five Eyes, Intelligence Alliance, US, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand were all firmly convinced invasion was imminent, despite French President Macron's grandstanding diplomacy with Putin.
And his reaction to the Ukrainian resistance.
Stunned as Ukrainians fought like wildcats for their freedom. A fierce, unexpected resistance that led Putin to become more ruthless. Shelling apartment blocks, schools, hospitals, using torture, summary executions like in Bucha.
Sparking a flush of shame in the West.
Recognizing the brutal reality, yes.
And he made that daring trip to Kyiv himself.
believing it dramatically essential to stand shoulder to shoulder, physically as well as metaphorically, with Zelensky, even risking an impromptu walkabout in the city, which had seen explodings just weeks before, a powerful symbolic act.
He dismisses claims he scuppered a peace deal.
As complete tripe, yes. Arguing no Ukrainian leader could have survived agreeing to Putin's terms after the atrocities. His job, he says, was simply to reassure Zelensky of Western support and, above all, of UK support, not dictate terms.
He recounts a challenging moment in Poland.
An emotional one. At an audience where Daria Kaleniuk, a Ukrainian refugee, confronted him directly about perceived lack of support while her family was dying.
And his own journey to Kiev by train. He felt fear.
Reflects on trying to calm himself staring at birch forests, realizing the banging was just the clanging of the commie-era train. A chilling thought crossed his mind. If Putin wouldn't take out a G7 leader, would he?
This section is raw, immediate, a major geopolitical turning point.
It is, and what's compelling is the human dimension. Zelensky's defiance, the suffering in Bucha, the author's own risks and fears. It powerfully illustrates how leadership in wartime often involves symbolic acts of solidarity and personal courage, as much as strategy and aid.
Moving now towards the end of the memoir, to his overarching philosophy of governance and some deeply personal reflections.
Right. He details his overarching domestic agenda, economic growth, regis rebalancing, positioning it as the blueprint for leveling up, informed by those London lessons.
His ambition was twofold.
To level up and unleash the potential of the whole UK domestically, and create a nation stronger and more confident abroad, what I called Global Britain.
He highlights that stark productivity gap.
Between London, with a gross value-added GVA of £90,700 per head per year, and core cities outside London ranging £45,000 to £60,000. Notes UK core cities are way, way less productive than their European counterparts, identifying this as a core structural economic problem.
And his solution.
A multi-pronged approach. Better local leadership, fiscal devolution, giving more financial power to local authorities, something he says he begged for in City Hall as mayor, and crucially, better housing supply and a much better planning system.
He laments the housing cost.
Punitive, he calls it. A national disgrace that the Conservatives, the party of Thatcher and Macmillan, were so lackadaisical in addressing it. Notes owner occupation for young people is lower in the UK than France or Germany.
Blaming NIMBYs. Not in my backyard, opponents of development.
Largely, yes. But he expresses pride that in 2019-20, we started to build more homes in the UK than in any year since 1987. Focusing on brownfield sites, regenerating areas like Barking Riverside in London, but also outside the capital to encourage families back into cities.
What about infrastructure? Voters don't prioritize it, he notes.
Yeah, always put infrastructure way down their list, he says, yet he believes it's vital. Even mentions Beijing universities reportedly teach British chopping and changing on HS2, the high-speed rail project, as an example of flaws in democratic systems.
But he proceeded with HS2.
He and then Chancellor Sajid Javid agreed to, given low borrowing costs, comparing the ambition to China's 25,000 miles of completed high-speed rail track.
Aiming to fix slow regional train times, too.
The shameful slowness between Liverpool and Manchester, the clankingly slow and awful Transpennine service, recognizing these as blockers to regional growth, highlighted the disgrace of Leeds being the largest city in Europe not to have a metro.
He recounts his journey on climate change, from cynic to believer.
Because he saw a way to go green that encouraged economic growth, avoiding what he calls hair shirt moralizing, that stern, self-righteous approach.
Pointing to London's CO2 output falling while population and GDP rose.
As proof it could be done, demonstrating economic growth and environmental improvement hand in hand.
His 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution had ambitious targets.
Very. 50 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. 24 gigawatts from nuclear by 2030 via Great British Nuclear Sizewell, Hinkley, developing small modular reactors, SMRs, from Rolls-Royce.
Still has faith in fusion energy, too.
Maintains his faith despite its 20 years away status for decades, adding a touch of self-aware humor. Also advocated for carbon capture and storage, Teesside BP project, rewilding large tracts, planting 30,000 more trees annually.
And he points to his London record abolishing quandos, cutting council tax as evidence for national reforms.
Yeah, selling TfL buildings, rationalizing police and fire estates. This whole outline shows a clear, interconnected vision for national renewal, explicitly linking London lessons to leveling up.
Trying to reconcile economic growth and environmental responsibility.
And showing determination to tackle long-standing issues through state-led investment, breaking from past orthodoxies.
Finally, the memoir concludes with a deeply personal insight into leadership challenges, internal dissent, public opinion, ultimately leading to his resignation.
Right. He describes PMQ's Prime Minister's questions as a bear pit, offers survival tips, including the vital importance of a lucky opponent like Jeremy Corbyn, who he says was in a bit of a muddle on Brexit and unwilling to force an election, giving him a political edge.
He recounts that weird and slowly gathering phenomenon of negative press briefings.
Odd little briefings appearing in papers, which he later discovered were part of a campaign systematically trying to undermine him, orchestrated by his former chief advisor Dom Cummings and communications director Lee Cain.
Starting as early as January 2020.
He claims so, and notes Cummings later admitted this in a BBC interview, a phenomenon he says he'd never seen anything quite like this, certainly not in City Hall, highlighting how unprecedented he found this internal sabotage.
The investigation into Cummings' lockdown travels caused a poll dip.
The government's first big knock in the polls, he says, and speculates Cummings didn't thank me for trying heroically to defend him, suggests a personal sense of betrayal or ingratitude.
The Owen Paterson affair is described as very cruel.
A situation where an MP breached lobbying rules. He says he tried to find a compromise against what felt like an effectively forced step down.
And Partygate, the Downing Street gatherings during lockdown.
He notes the allegations triggered a hail of anti-Tory abuse for MPs, who, he says, blamed him more for his handling of the crisis than the substance itself. He claims he tried pleading it was very largely nonsense, a media-driven campaign being fed by some former advisors.
Dismissing media portrayals of him fleeing during foreign trips.
As a cowardy custard fleeing my foes, yeah. Like his long-desired India trip, canceled twice by COVID. Seeing these portrayals as absurdly unfair. He even recounts hilarity and scorn in the Kremlin at the kind of thing that British MPs got up to requiring the PM's attention. Shows how internal squabbles were perceived globally.
Despite the battering from Partygate, he felt confident about the next election.
States he was confident of leading my party into it. Noting polls often had Tories only a handful of points behind Labour, suggesting a recoverable position. Felt he'd won a reprieve after surviving that June 2022 no-confidence vote from his own MPs.
But acknowledges a stark reality about internal divisions.
For every Tory MP that I felt I could call my friend, there was at least one who was most definitely not on my side. Illustrates the deep splits that persisted.
He recounts the mass resignations in July 2022 that finally brought him down.
And how voters were left mystified by what had happened, unable to fully grasp the internal dynamics. He expresses fondness for Rishi Sunak, his friend and partner.
But admits doubts about his readiness.
Admits he had not seen the evidence that he knew how to cope with the scale of the job, despite Sunak assuring complete support for as long as you want. He assumed Sunak would reciprocate that loyalty, a clear indication of his expectation.
He ends by thanking those who stuck by him.
Calling them the heroes, firmly maintains that with them, we had a great agenda for the country, would have beaten inflation, delivered infrastructure, new homes, been visibly getting on with leveling up. He highlights his housing record, claiming he outbuilt both Livingstone and Khan in London, planned to fix the planning system using Brexit freedoms.
This concluding section gives a deeply personal insight into the isolation and pressure of that top job.
It really does.
What's fascinating is the tension between his unwavering belief in his agenda and those relentless internal and external forces, dissent, media scrutiny, personal betrayals constantly challenging him.
It leaves you wondering, doesn't it? In modern politics, can a leader's grand vision truly triumph over such constant forces, or are they just unavoidable features of the job itself?
A big question. So we've journeyed through this political figure's remarkable account, from Brexit complexities and London's transformation to global challenges like the pandemic and war.
Yeah, this deep dive has really offered a unique vantage point on leadership, policymaking, and those relentless pressures of public life.
The memoir paints this vivid picture of a leader constantly battling, always with a grand vision for unleashing Britain's potential. Given the sheer scale of the challenges, the internal resistance, the unpredictable global events, this account really prompts us to reflect.
On the true measure of a leader's legacy.
Exactly. Is it solely about the battles fought, the bold ambitions declared? Or is it ultimately about the outcomes, many of which only truly become clear long after a leader leaves office?
It suggests that winning can often be just a fleeting moment in the long, complex game of governance.
with the real impact only visible maybe decades later. Something for you to mull over.